in one place. Need a pro to fix that emergency leak? Maybe you're looking to set your seasonal tasks.
I'm not going to rant. I just want to say
all that and more. Expert pros, hundreds
people,
of projects, clear pricing.
there are people out there in the world that are just
this is
not nice.
Your home for everything.
It's really, you know, the best thing to do to a person who's not nice is just make it very clear to them that they can't affect your day. Just laugh it off, like, how are you that miserable? Anyways, and then go about your life. Second, I think I lost my sense of smell. My chest has been feeling kind of weird. And I have zero energy, or less energy than usual. So I'm gonna have to get a COVID test later today when I wake up. And then I cough. That's funny. I kind of hope I have it. I could use the 14 days off. As long as like I have it, but I don't get extremely sick. I don't know. Anyways, alright.
Our chief international correspondent, Clarissa Ward. She's joining us live from Kabul right now. Clarissa, there are thousands and thousands of Americans and Afghans. They are hoping to flee the country, but are so fearful of being attacked by Taliban fighters on their way to the
yesterday on my way to home, if you notice, the video starts while I'm already on the road. And they always start when I'm pulling out of the store. And that's because the volume was low on the phone, and I hit the volume button on the phone and it ended the video. But the Apple Watch controls that volume. So, yeah, cool.
Runway, but certainly their tactics are being called into question. I spoke to the
take off the shoe every day on the way home. I've been taking off my shoes.
He saw Taliban fighters at a checkpoint outside the perimeter of the airport, beating
and then I turn on the cold air directed right at my feet.
At a certain point, for taking a photograph of one of these Taliban fighters, and a woman and her child tried to push through, and Taliban fighters actually shot them. They were not killed, they were quite seriously injured, but this gives you a sense of the chaotic scenes that are still playing out at the airport. It is largely under control by comparison to the sort of epic images that we've seen coming out of the airport over the past few days, but certainly still very tense on the perimeter. So many people trying to get in, the Taliban trying to keep people back, allowing safe passage to those who need to go, but trying to keep rule and order in the way that they know how to do it, Wolf, which entails, in this case, shots fired and whips.
In Kabul today, many of them, they are so fearful of what's to come. So many of them are simply afraid to go out on the streets. What has already changed for them, potentially, though, under Taliban rule?
Well, so far it's difficult to see how different life will look like under Taliban rule. The Taliban is trying to say, listen, guys, everything's fine. We are a new branded Taliban. They let government workers come back to their posts today. We went to a market. It was pretty crowded. But there are differences. You can already see it. People are fearful. They don't want to go out on the streets. And it's particularly who's fearful and who doesn't want to go on the streets. The most vulnerable citizens. Take a look. At the central Kabul market today, stores were open and people were back on the streets. Or at least some people. It was impossible not to notice that women here seemed to have largely melted away. One store was doing better business than usual. For more than a decade, Mohammed has been selling burqas, the head-to-toe covering once imposed by the Taliban. Business was good, but now it's even better, he tells us. More sales. Why do you think they're selling more burqas right now? Because the Taliban took over and all the women are afraid, he says. So that's why they're all coming in and buying burqas. Do you feel abandoned?
Yeah, exactly.
In an apartment downtown, we saw that fear firsthand. Until last week, Fazila was working for the UN. That's not her real name, and she asks we not show her face. She's petrified that the Taliban will link her to Western organizations and says she hasn't gone outside since they arrived in Kabul. You look very frightened.
Exactly. Too much stress. It is not easy for a person to work a lot with international organization, having more than 10 years experience of working with international, and now no one of them helped me. Just sending emails to different organizations that I work with you, but now no response.
Are you angry?
No, I'm not angry, but as a person that who work with them, and now I need their supports. It is not fair.
You look very emotional as well.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about my future, my daughters. What will happen to them if they kill me? Two daughters without mother.
The Taliban says they have learned from history and that women's rights will be protected. But many fearful Afghan women remain to be persuaded. We're on our way now to the home of a prominent female Afghan politician. She's told me that there are Taliban fighters outside her front door, so she's asked that I go in alone. Fawzia Kufi was one of the Afghan government negotiators during peace talks with the Taliban and has dealt with the group a lot. She says that promising change is not enough.
They have to really prove it in the provinces across Afghanistan. They have to show it by example. It's very easy to issue statements, but people need to see that in practice.
Kufi has every reason not to trust. Last year, she was shot by unknown gunmen. The Taliban denied they were behind the attack. You have children?
I have two daughters.
And are they here?
They are in Kabul.
And are you concerned for them, or?
I'm concerned for my daughters and all the girls of Afghanistan. I don't want history to repeat itself on them very brutally.
20 years of progress for women in Afghanistan now hangs by a thread. Tonight we saw for the first time the Taliban spokesperson, Zabiullah Mujahid. Journalists have been talking to him for years, but now we finally saw him behind the podium answering questions. And what was so extraordinary, Wolf, was the bravery of the questions coming from these Afghan journalists. They were not pulling any punches. They were pushing him on women's rights. They were pushing him on whether female journalists would be allowed to keep doing their job. And one Afghan man asked a question that honestly just really stuck with me. Mujahid had been talking about this blanket amnesty that the Taliban was offering to people, and this Afghan journalist said to him, "But will the Afghan people forgive you for what you have done, for the scores of civilians who've been killed in your car bombs?" And to which Mujahid said simply, well, you know, collateral damage happens sometimes. But I just thought it was so interesting and such a marker of a new moment that the Taliban, whether or not they've changed, Afghan people have changed. These young journalists have changed, and they are willing to fight and speak out for what they believe in, Wolf.
I hope these young journalists are going to be okay after those blunt, tough questions. Clarissa, be careful over there. We will stay in very close touch. Clarissa Ward on the scene for us in Kabul. Let's go to the White House right now, where officials are echoing President Biden's defiance on Afghanistan. At least one top official suggests there is no internal second-guessing of the president's strategy. Our chief White House correspondent, Caitlin Collins, is joining us right now. Caitlin, the administration is doubling down on what we heard from the president, right?
They are. That's his top aides who have been here at the White House speaking with reporters today, as President Biden himself has been monitoring all of this afar from Camp David, though he is set to return here to the White House in just a few hours tonight. And Wolf, he is coming back to a Washington where typically his allies on Capitol Hill, Democratic lawmakers, are even questioning his drawdown of the troops in Afghanistan and how this has proceeded, with Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, who is the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, saying in a statement, quote, they want a full accounting for these shortcomings. Tonight, the Biden administration is defending its exit from Afghanistan while attempting to manage the fallout from a chaotic departure.
There have been questions raised about whether we should have drawn down our embassy and evacuated our Afghan allies earlier. These are reasonable questions.
An internal blame game over why the U.S. didn't act sooner is underway, As CNN reports, an intelligence assessment within the last month showed the Taliban were pursuing a total military victory. President Biden's national security advisor says they planned for months.
Even well-drawn plans don't survive first contact with reality, and they require adjustments.
After Biden largely blamed the Taliban takeover on Afghans unwilling to fight, Jake Sullivan said he's also taking responsibility.
He's taking responsibility for every decision the United States government took with respect to Afghanistan because, as he said, the buck stops with him. I am also taking responsibility, and so are my colleagues.
The top national security aide promising a review of what could have been done differently.
We will conduct an extensive hot wash, as we say. We will take a look at every aspect of this from top to bottom.
For now, their primary goal is evacuating the thousands of Americans who remain in Afghanistan, with assurances from an unlikely group.
The Taliban have informed us that they are prepared to provide the safe passage of civilians to the airport, and we intend to hold them to that commitment.
Thousands of U.S. troops are on the ground in Kabul with the mission of getting Americans and endangered Afghans out.
We will be putting 300 passengers on your average military cargo plane heading out of the country, one after another, hot onloading and hot offloading.
Top military commanders are in communication with Taliban leaders that Biden said just weeks ago he couldn't trust.
Do I trust the Taliban? No.
Now that they control the capital, aides say it's too soon to say if the Taliban will be seen as a legitimate form of government.
Ultimately, it's going to be up to the Taliban to show the rest of the world who they are and how they intend to proceed. The track record has not been good.
And Wolf, of course, what has happened in Afghanistan is being monitored by the world as well, including a lot of major U.S. allies. And until today, President Biden actually had not spoken with any of those allies, despite the fall of Kabul happening on Sunday. But now he has spoken to the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And according to a readout that was issued by Downing Street, during that conversation they had about evacuating people out of Afghanistan, Prime Minister Johnson, quote, stressed the importance of not losing the gains made in Afghanistan over the last 20 years, of protecting ourselves against any emerging threat from terrorism, and of continuing to support the people of Afghanistan. So thinly, but not so thinly veiled, they're making clear their feelings on what has happened, as well as we've seen these reactions from across the world pour in. And we should note, well, there is going to be a virtual meeting of the G7 leaders next week. Of course, Afghanistan is going to be at the top of the list of things that they have to talk about.
Yeah, lots of disappointment coming
What
in from
happened to COVID?
America's NATO allies.
All of a
them
sudden.
stunned by what has happened in Afghanistan over the past few days. All right, Caitlin, thank you very much. Let's get a closer look right now at the increasingly desperate evacuation effort unfolding in Afghanistan, which includes a huge number of Americans. Our Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr is with us. Barbara, the White House says there are, about 11,000 self-identified American citizens still in Afghanistan. What's the plan to safely get them all out?
Well, Wolf, that 11,000 figure, nobody's even sure if that is actually accurate. Of course, that is just an estimate at this hour. The administration is still telling Americans who are in Kabul not to travel to the airport unless they have some indication that they have a flight, that they have some indication from the U.S. government that they will be able to get out. They want them to shelter in place until it is safe for them to travel. So that is item number one. Now, once they get to the airport, there's about 6,000 troops that the U.S. hopes to put on the ground to continue to ensure security at the airport and to have it orderly and safe for them to depart. But progress is slow right now. Today, about roughly 1,000 people got out, but just over 300 of them were Americans. The Pentagon says it is going to ramp up that throughput, if you will, ramp up the air bridge to get people out, but still only 2 weeks to go before the deadline of the end of the month, and they have a lot of people to move with.
Barbara, we've all seen that really dramatic video of the U.S. Air Force military plane swarmed by people on the tarmac in Kabul. I understand the U.S. Air Force is now opening a full-scale investigation. Is that right?
Yeah, they are doing that. You know, this is such a tragic series of events. Afghans so desperate that they would attach themselves to an aircraft and hope that they could survive. When that C-17 landed in Doha, Qatar, they found human remains in the wheel well. So the Air Force quite correctly wants to investigate, find out exactly what happened, and find out how, of course, perhaps they can prevent this from happening again.
All right, Barbara Starr at the Pentagon for us. So Barbara, thanks very much. Let's get some analysis, some more on all of the key member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. I know you're very close to the president. You're a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. Are you getting any specific answers for why the administration was, for all practical purposes, blindsided by this Taliban victory within only a few days?
Well, Wolf, this has been a hard week as we have all watched the tragic scenes unfolding in Kabul and the unexpectedly swift collapse of the Afghan military and government. And I think there's going to be plenty of time for pointing fingers and for an after-action review, as National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan promised today. And we should be pulling together, Congress and the executive, our military and State Department, to ensure that we get as many Americans and Afghan allies and partners out of Kabul safely as we possibly can in the weeks ahead. The military has said publicly, when they get the airport fully operational again and they've fully secured it, they can remove as many as 5,000 people a day. I am hopeful that in the coming days we'll get to that operational tempo and be able to safely remove all Americans and our closest Afghan partners and allies.
But you've been briefed extensively over these past several weeks. Did you ever expect that the Afghan political leadership would simply escape, run away, get out of the country within a few days, and that the entire 300,000 member Afghan military would collapse, put their guns down, all their weapons down, and for all practical purposes, hand over all that U.S. military equipment, tanks, artillery, everything else, armored personnel carriers, to the Taliban? Did you expect that to take place within 3 or 4 days?
Not at all. Wolf, I was shocked by the speed with which the Taliban swept across the country, and the fact that, after fighting bravely and hard for many, many years, the Afghan National Security Defense Forces largely collapsed without a fight in many provincial capitals, and that the Afghan government collapsed and their leaders fled. That was quite a surprise to me. I will say this, Wolf, going back to my first visit to Afghanistan a decade ago, it was clear that our initial mission in Afghanistan, which was striking back at al-Qaeda after 9/11 and knocking down the capability of any terrorist group to attack our homeland from Afghanistan, had largely been accomplished in the first few years. And the expanded mission undertaken over 4 administrations of trying to build a nation in Afghanistan was very difficult, very tenuous, and that frankly, even after pouring tens of billions of dollars over many years, I saw a decade ago on my first visit to Afghanistan that the Afghan National Security Forces and the government that led them were not likely in the long run to succeed in holding off the Taliban and in developing a deep and legitimate government.
I think it's more like hundreds of billions of dollars, U.S. taxpayer dollars, that were wasted for all practical purposes over these years in Afghanistan. And on the 20th anniversary next month of 9/11, the Taliban once again will be in control of that entire country. As you know, Senator, a senior White House official is telling CNN today there's no second guessing of the president's strategy. But when you see this absolute chaos unfolding, shouldn't there be some second guessing?
Well, 2 things if I could. Well, first, this was not a wasted effort over 20 years. I've been speaking to veterans, to Gold Star families, to very concerned Americans who've been calling me alarmed about Afghan partners or Americans they know who are in harm's way in Afghanistan. The men and women of the United States Armed Forces and our Afghan partners over the last 2 decades bought us desperately needed breathing room to push back on al-Qaeda, to degrade their ability to attack us, to buy the United States time to strengthen our own defenses, to build a global network of counterterrorism partners. And I'll remind you that when President Biden took office early this year, the intelligence community's assessment was that the global war on terror has largely moved on from Afghanistan. And to the extent we face threats, they are much more from other countries like Somalia or Libya or Mali or Nigeria, other places in the world. And second, yes, of course, there has to be accountability for some of the missteps here. President Biden, in a clear speech to our nation last night, said the buck stops here. One of the reasons I've long admired and supported President Biden is he said he won't mislead the American people. He's been clear-eyed about why he made the decision to complete our withdrawal after 20 years of fighting in Afghanistan. And both he last night and National Security Advisor Sullivan today, in a lengthy press conference, made it clear that they intend to focus on this urgent mission right now in securing the safe passage out of Afghanistan of our citizens and our key partners and allies, and that there will be an after-action review.
But aren't you concerned, Senator, that with the Taliban now in control of all of Afghanistan, with access to all the U.S. military equipment that was left behind,
should have left it fucking behind.
Opening up all those prisons, Al-Qaeda terrorists free right now, Taliban terrorists free right now, that there could be a
Whoa, John, wake up.
emanating from Afghanistan?
Well, that's
Almost fallen
absolutely
asleep
right.
like
That
4
is
times.
a serious and legitimate concern. But I'll remind you, we don't have a significant troop presence on the ground in countries like Somalia or Yemen or Libya. We maintain a robust counterterrorism capability that we've built up over 20 years, and we're going to be able to, we must continue to maintain that.
COVID was so important
with
all of
regards
a
to any
sudden.
resurgence of Al-Qaeda or ISIS on the ground in Afghanistan. It is concerning that Bagram Air Base was abandoned and that military prison at Bagram has now been opened by the Taliban. And I am concerned about developments on the ground in Afghanistan in terms of our security. That is the sort of issue that we in the Foreign Relations Committee, the Intelligence Committee, Armed Services Committee will be focused on in the months ahead. But I have confidence in President Biden, his national security team, our military, and our State Department, that they will remain vigilant in protecting our country from threats overseas.
It worries me so much as so many of those Al-Qaeda terrorists and Taliban terrorists killed so many Americans in Afghanistan, and NATO personnel are now free, and for all practical purposes, they're taking charge of that country. Senator Chris Coons, as usual, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you all.
Just ahead, one more on the political fallout from President Biden as he faces very sharp criticism from both Republicans and some Democrats over the fall of Afghanistan. The White House says President Biden takes responsibility and stands by his decision as he faces very sharp criticism over the sudden and totally chaotic fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban. Even fellow Democrats are taking the president to task. Former Obama senior advisor David Axelrod said President Biden needs to, quote, own that failure as commander-in-chief. Here's how the White House press secretary responded to that today.
There are a few people I respect as
What
much
are
as
you?
David Axelrod.
Hey, what are you? Are you a Beamer? You look like a Beamer. You're a Beamer. Not interested.
By his decision, because he knows it's in the interest of the United States, our national security, and the American people. And he's not going to ask mothers and fathers to send their children to fight a war the Afghans won't fight for themselves.
What happened?
He's joining us right now, our senior political commentator, David Axelrod. There you see him along with CNN.
I thought
political
protecting
analyst,
us
New York
meant
Times,
COVID.
Washington correspondent Maggie Haberman. David, so what's your
I mean, I probably
response
have
to
COVID.
that? Do you really need to be inside the White House?
I can't taste my watermelon gum. Watermelon gum. Strong as fuck. Can't taste it. And it's so bizarre not being able to taste things. Okay. Sorry.
And I have nothing but respect for her. And she did there what a good professional
Yeah.
secretary should do. She
Legit
should
chewing the gum.
to
Can't taste
friendlier
it.
terrain.
Chest
I
feels a
did
little
not in
weird.
any way
Feels like I have like a ticklish throat.
I thought that did quite a good job, frankly, in his speech yesterday about explaining why he thought it was time to get out of Afghanistan. But of course, that's not why he was called upon to make an emergency speech. He was called upon to make that speech.
I will
because
fucking drag
the
race shift
execution
before I
of
let
that
this van get in front of me.
Was desperate.
I've just now decided.
And defied what the country
Yeah,
had been
there you
told
go.
would happen. So it
There you
was
go, buddy.
And it was a manifest.
Now you,
that was clear to everyone. And
little car that's
I
been
just
patient
thought,
behind this van.
the standpoint
You're fine.
of his
You can go in front of me.
presentation, that it would be better to
And
just
Infinity, I
acknowledge
have no
that
choice.
and say,
He's gonna get
you
it.
know, we're gonna take, you should have said more what Chris Coons said in his interview.
Go ahead, let's go,
just
people.
A few minutes ago.
Meow.
It obviously didn't go where
Come
it
on,
was
little car.
supposed to go, and
You can do it.
You know, the important thing
You're on
now
call.
is to look back and find out what
There you go.
in the immediate, go forward and figure out how to remedy the situation as best you can. And so, you know, Jim was
So you accelerated to get in front of me,
logic behind leaving.
to force me to go 60 when you could have just went behind me.
My question was, what about the execution?
Got it.
Execution clearly was not what even the president.
So apparently,
anticipated this exactly the opposite.
all this construction,
One senior White House official
fucking Amazon.
says, I'm quoting now, our
This
confidence is being questioned.
gigantic fucking building.
Serious questions about President
It's a
Biden's
fucking Amazon. It is like a mile long. It's the biggest fucking warehouse in our area. That's for damn sure. Alright, if you're getting on the freeway, I'm going to take you to school. Get the lane. There you go, kill it. Alright, let's get on the freeway, you little bitch. Yeah. 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 Come on, keep up. Keep up. Oh, someone leaked transmission fluid. Little understeer. Oh yeah. Someone was leaking something.
So now, but that is not the question. Themselves, but I think in fairness to officials who are standing here answering these questions, they are
says that David never mentioned that this was all happening on your age club. See just how different we can react.
Big crane.
Well, look, I think first of all, Democrats are fairly critical of the president, and I think there is bipartisan
Very
concern
confusing.
with the execution
Alright, we're gonna go around this truck.
of this mission. But clearly, you know,
We got that going
if
on.
you're asking a question, you know the answer to.
I'm not sure what that means.
And so you tend to take over there, drive
This is going on.
The thing that I would be concerned about if I were the president is, you know, we've now, this is a traditional thing in Washington. We're both very familiar with it. You know, today's been a day of figure, the State Department, right? Figure the Defense Department, the State Department, and both of them at the intel community leaking what they told the president. So this is not what they want to be doing. This is not what you want. And so it's better to be transparent. It didn't go right. There were reasons it didn't go right. Find out what those reasons are. But in the immediate, also give people assurance that you're moving forward and doing the things that need to be done. What do you think?
Yellow light.
I think David is right. I mean, look, I think that
It's your fault. You.
the White House and this administration in general
You.
has managed to
Stupid
avoid.
Tahoe.
They've waited a long time. They've waited for the chaos over the last 7 months. It's pride for them. This scenario, not just in terms of what we're
Are you serious?
seeing, in terms of these images.
There's literally no one there. There's no one to my left. No one to my left, no one to my right. Why did that light go green? Anyone? No? Nothing? Fuck you. Today should be my day off, but I got fucked with. I gotta work 2 more fucking days. Oops, what fucking anchor is that? turn that on.